Hello aspirants and welcome again to Legacy IAS Academy. In this lecture, we will be discussing about the Waqf Board, the Waqf Amendment Bill and the ongoing case in the Supreme Court. We'll see what the argument the government is making in that case as of now. We'll also in detail understand what is Waqf by user and what is the issue around it. So what is the news all about? So the government has brought in the Waqf Amendment Bill, which of course has been passed and received President's assent, and hence it has now become an act. Now, subsequent to which, of course, there were petitions that were filed in the Supreme Court with respect to concerns that were raised against that particular act. So presently as we speak, there is an ongoing case in the Supreme Court. The proceedings are going on. On one side, there are the petitioners who are criticizing and wanting to reject or change or modify or completely scrap the bill altogether. On the other side, it is the government of India represented by the Solicitor General of India, who is of course siding by the government and of course actually trying to explain why this act has come into place in the first place. So let us understand what is happening so far. So what is this Waqf Amendment Act? Basically, this Waqf Amendment Act of 2025, it amends the Waqf Act of 1995. Why does it do it? So as of now, it was seen that the government did not have much control over the Waqf and the Waqf board, as a result of which there can be major issues, there can be inefficiency in the functioning of the Waqf board. So in order to allow the government to regulate the Waqf properties, the amendment was brought in, because as we speak, before the bill, in fact, there was no government control as such on the Waqf property. So the government want to have that control in order to regulate that Waqf property. That is why this amendment was brought in. Just imagine a scenario wherein anything, not just necessarily the Waqf land, but anything in India, if it is left completely unregulated, do you think that is the right approach? Probably not. So that is why the need was felt to bring in government regulation over here. However, the criticism is that this is probably an encroachment. So let us see further. First, let us understand what is Waqf. Waqf basically means a permanent dedication by any person. Any person means it need not necessarily belong to a particular religion. It need not necessarily be a Muslim who is donating or dedicating a particular piece of land, movable or immovable property, anything. It can be anyone. Anyone can basically dedicate a movable or immovable property. So it can be immovable property, generally the land, or movable property, something else as well, for the purpose that is recognized by the Muslim law as pious. Pious means sacred, good, in the let's say in the service of the Almighty, which is considered to be pious, religious, or charitable in nature. So any person who is giving such kind of a charity permanently, then that particular thing becomes the Waqf. So that is what is known as Waqf. It consists of movable as well as immovable property. Immovable property generally means the land or the structure therein, right? So now what the government has to say about the Waqf? Basically, the government or the representative of the government, in this case in the Supreme Court, is stating that Waqf is an Islamic concept. Yes, he is agreeing that the Waqf is an Islamic concept, but what is the issue? It is not an essential part of Islam, is what is being said. Now, this to some extent is actually clear. If we dissect this statement, to some extent it is clear. Let us understand how. Now in Islam, there are 5 things which are compulsory, which is known as the 5 pillars of Islam. They are compulsory, known as fard, which you have to do no matter what, as in if you are capable of doing it, you should do it. Now in that, if you look at this one, it is known as zakat, that is alms giving, which is nothing but charity. So any person, any Muslim is basically obliged to give 2.5% of their accumulated wealth. That means what? If I have 100 acres of land, for example, and I have accumulated it, I should donate 2.5 acres of land, or I should donate the value, let's say the 100 acres of land is worth 100 crores. So basically I have an accumulated amount of 100 crores. So I should compulsorily donate 2.5% of that wealth. That means 2.5 crore. So what I can do is I can donate 2.5 acres of land as Waqf. Now this is actually one of the compulsory things that you have to do. However, this statement is also not completely incorrect. It is just misleading, not necessarily completely incorrect, because let's say instead of 2.5 acres, I donate 5 acres. So 2.5 acres will come under the compulsory thing that is I am required to do. The compulsory thing that I am required to do as per the Islamic law. But the other 2.5% is not necessarily required by me to be done. Right? So this statement saying that it is not an essential part of Islam, part of it need not. Anything in excess of 2.5% is not necessary. If you want, you can do it, else there is no need to do. But that 2.5% is actually necessary. Now here, understand that this is just the argument that the government has presented in front of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will hear further arguments and then respond to it. So as it stands, we are dissecting what is being sent over here. Now next, the Solicitor General talked about charity being recognized in every religion. Yes, absolutely, that is correct. And it cannot be regarded as an essential tenet of any religion. Now this is possible. Some religion may not regard it as necessary, but some religions can. As we see here, it is one of the compulsory things. But mind you, only up to 2.5% is compulsory. Beyond that is not. If you are doing additional, yes, then you can clearly say that that is not an essential practice, but up to 2.5% is actually the requirement. Now, what other concerns are there? The Act grants the government the authority to regulate the Waqf properties. At the same time, also determine their status. What is the status? Who owns it? Who does not? Now this, people are criticizing, is reducing the autonomy of the Waqf board. Now if the government or the government representative decides the status of the property, that means the Waqf is not having a much role. The role of the Waqf has been diluted, right? So that is a concern for the people. So what is the response of the government? The government says that this section provides only, we want to know the status only for our entry with respect to the revenue records. As the question of the title, that needs to be clear. So to resolve those things and for the revenue purposes, etc., we want to know the status and we want to ensure that the registration, everything is complete, so that there is no issue, is what the government is saying over here. And the Solicitor General has clearly mentioned that there is no basis to say that the government can unilaterally take over the Waqf land. He has said that it is completely false that you are saying that the government can take over. It's not the case. If the government is contesting, probably they can contest, but then later on it is the court that will decide whose property it is. The government cannot unilaterally decide. So these are all false pretexts which is coming forward. Now, what other concerns are there? Some critics are also arguing that allowing non-Muslim officials on the Waqf board will violate community's right to manage its religious affairs under Article 26. So Article 26 provides for 4 rights. Number 1 is right to establish and maintain institution for religious and charitable purposes. So 26A is being violated if you include non-Muslims on the Waqf board, is what has been criticized. However, what is being said by the government of India is saying that unlike the Hindu endowments that are there, the Waqf board does not touch upon any religious activity. It is rather doing only the secular activities and having only secular functions. So secular functions of generation of revenue, of administration, of operation, it is not as such touching upon. The Waqf board is not touching about any religious activity that is going on inside a mosque, for example. It is only taking care of the administrative and operational things which are secular in nature. So that is what is being said over here. And since the operations or the functions are secular, now every state, that any state can actually regulate that particular activity. The functions of the Waqf board, it's purely secular, is what has been stated by the government over here in the Supreme Court. Another provision which has been criticized is removal of Waqf by user principle. So there is a Waqf by user principle which is now being removed from this act. So what is this Waqf by principle? Sorry, Waqf by user principle. Waqf by user principle means, let's say there is a property. Now since 50, 60 or 100 years, that property has been, on that property, let's say a mosque has been established or a dargah has been established, or let's say a graveyard, a Muslim graveyard has been established, and since decades and years and over 100 years it is being used like that only. So in that case, just based on the use of that property, it will be declared as a Waqf property. It will be assumed to be donated, given in charity, for it to be a Waqf property. Then it does not matter who owned, whether the documents of that property is present with the Waqf board or not. It will not matter because it is being used for that particular purpose. So that is basically Waqf by user principle. The key features are long-term use. Long-term use is the defining feature over here. If that property has been used for since a long time, let's say for a mosque wherein people are coming and offering namaz, then it will continue to be used like that, and it will be continue to be called as a Waqf property just because of the fact that it is being used, even though no documentation exists for that. So no formal deed. Traditionally there needs to be formal deed, registration, all those things. Even if it does not exist, just based on the term usage, long-term usage, it will be declared as that. At the same time, it is irrevocable in nature. That means once a Waqf, always a Waqf. You cannot revoke that right which has been given, is what is the feature of the Waqf by user principle. Legal recognition. Indian jurisprudence and the statutes previously have recognized this Waqf for user principle previously. However, this present Amendment Act removes the Waqf by user principle. Now, so what is the government responding to this? The government is responding, we have removed this, and what we want, that the registration should be done, and it was already present in the previous Waqf Act also. For example, the Mussalman Waqf Act of 1923 already had a provision in section 3 which mandated registration. So we are mandating the requirement of the registration which needs to be there. It is nothing new, is what we are doing, is being contested by the government of India. So this is what the arguments of government of India was in the Supreme Court. Now it will keep continuing, and subsequently a decision will be made. We will be dissecting each and everything that is going on and the final judgment as well. So stay tuned to Legacy IAS Academy. Thank you.